Welcome to this phase podcast series, Continuing to Parent in Lockdown. Hello and welcome back to episode 3. Here we are, Hannah, our final episode.
Our final episode indeed, yeah.
And I've remembered my cup of tea this time.
Hey.
I made sure I had it with me.
Great.
I couldn't do another one of watching you drink yours and wishing I had mine.
Got to save. Always got to have a cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. So
Definitely.
That's sorted. But it's been great. And has there been any standout points for you so far?
I just think all three have just brought like real wisdom, and there's just real variety, and kind of think, you know, that phrase of, yes, we've all been in the same storm of kind of COVID, but actually we've all been in a different boat and all our experiences have been different but also valid. And so I think everything that people said has been really valid and really helpful. And just again, that idea of, you know, just checking in with yourself and seeing how you're doing, and thinking about your well-being.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think that's what I found really great in the last episode, just thinking about how can we be proactive and intentional about putting those things in place to check in with ourselves, to recognise maybe when we need to change something before we get to that real low or, you know, really difficult place.
Yeah, definitely. So in the last episode, we talked about the data not quite adding up and the potential explanation that people were just, you know, too busy to check in with where they're at. Do you think there's any other explanations for why that might be?
I think there's another reason that I've kind of thought of, and it's something that's been mentioned already by people, is that idea that like, oh, I'm really lucky, I should be really grateful, because other people are always in a worse position than me, so I can't complain. And I think there's so much positive in that. You know, it gives us really good perspective, it helps us to be grateful, to focus on the positives, which is all like really amazing key strategies. But it also can mean that maybe we aren't real, or we aren't kind enough to ourselves, because we think, you know, I'm not doing that bad, I'm fine, I need to get on with it. So that's what I really spoke to Kirstie, Nicholas and Donna about, and their thoughts on this, you know, whether we can go from survival mode, where being good well-being just means that I haven't lost my job or that nobody's sick, to actually like aiming a bit higher and being able to really thrive and reach good level of well-being.
Yeah, definitely resonates. I think that's the thing, and I think I definitely experienced that a little bit myself, like I said earlier, with having friends that were working through this, and, you know, maybe with younger children, which I think has definitely been a more stressful, you know, like I said, there's different things with the older ones, a bit worried maybe a bit more about their mental health side of things, whereas with the younger ones, It's just so constant, isn't it? Physically demanding all day, every day, physically and mentally demanding. So, you know, I got friends with little ones and trying to hold down a job, and older kids, and you're thinking, oh, well, I literally can't moan about anything. And like you say, we're well. And so I think part of it is definitely worth focusing on that to an extent, and realizing that actually not comparing yourself, not like, oh, but realizing, yeah, none of us are ill. Actually, this is okay. You know, this is what it is. Not like just I've got to get on with it, but to an extent, we have just got to get on with it and get through. So there's an element of that. So I quite like that, like bit of resilience. I think you've got to have that. But equally, yeah, definitely, I think people are really struggling. And I think as it goes on, the longer it goes on, especially friends of mine who are working from home, I think just that side of things, and then perhaps their husbands are working from home, and it's just a situation they're just not used to. And I think all of us for a while were like, yeah, we can do this, and just for a short time. And the longer it's gone on, and you sort of think, oh, is this how it is now? And it's so different it's like anything, isn't it? It's like we're not out the other side, but you are a bit. We're out of that really severe lockdown, and you're sort of like, oh, what are the ramifications of this now? And I think people are, definitely struggling with that, definitely, and have an expectation that they should be okay. But I think, like I said earlier, I think it's just important you do talk to people about how you're feeling about it. And I guess it's maybe not choosing that person who, you know, is really stressed and in that worst situation, if you like, but just, you know, someone that's maybe in a similar one to you, if you know someone that you can just say, oh, I know we're not perhaps got much to moan about, but I am finding this really hard, or I am struggling with that. And massive power in talking to people. I think once it's out of your head, you feel a lot better, right?
Yeah.
For me, that's definitely true.
Again, going back, trying to look at the positives of it, I think one of the positives is that well-being and mental health generally is sort of coming to the front of public consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see it a lot more in the media. There's a lot more people talking about the impact of the pandemic. The numbers and the science are very clear that we are in a mental health crisis, and that is only going to get worse the longer that the pandemic continues.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, one of the challenges is that there's these kind of multiple camps. So I guess because I'm in the camp you might describe as a more positive experience from the lockdown, the immediate assumption is, oh well, he, she, them, you know, they must be feeling great. They must be, you know, really. And it's like we've all got our own pressures in our own lives. Now, yes, relative to someone else, I'm in a broadly stable job. You know, I'm not on furlough. I haven't been made redundant. So I suppose I'm not in survival mode from a financial point of view, but I've still had some days where I really I did not want to get out of bed, and you know, I couldn't face the world. And I don't think that is any different from someone that is, say, in a more precarious financial position, because we have to kind of there is something for me in being grateful that, you know, your position is X, you know, not necessarily to compare it to someone else's, but acknowledging that it could be worse. But equally, I think we've kind of got to be okay to just recognize and accept and respect how we feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we feel like we're struggling, if you feel like we can't get out of bed, if you feel like we're anxious, well, you could feel like that when you just won the lottery.
Yeah.
You know, or when you've got everything that you ever thought that life could give you, you can still have a day where you do not want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it's just about respecting that we're all human, regardless of what our particular situation is. I think our situation can make, you know, focusing on well-being and being well more difficult, for sure. You know, that there's definitely circumstantial aspects to that, but you know, I think you can thrive and be in a really tricky personal position, but equally you can feel like you're in survival mode and have everything at your feet.
Yeah, from the outside perspective, yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean, that's the thing with when you talk about you know the health of your mind. I mean, the other day I was chatting to my daughter, she's 7, about worry, and she said to me, well, Daddy, you don't look worried because you're not crying, or you're not, like, she was expecting to see like a physical response.
Yeah.
And that to me kind of summarizes how we often think about it. It's like, you know, someone's only mentally not well if I can see something physically.
Yeah.
But quite a lot of the time it's hidden, which is the whole reason why we need to be talking about it and offering support, and offering, you know, the support that great charities like Phase offer, right? We have to do all of that, because otherwise it will stay in someone's head.
Yeah. So I guess I have another question actually off the back of that, is how do we encourage people that even if they haven't lost somebody or they haven't lost their job, that it's okay to kind of be more vocal about those struggles and talk to people and reach out and get help?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. It's a tricky one, because again, speaking from personal experience, when I was at my lowest, because I didn't want to recognize how I was feeling, and I also didn't really understand it, if I'm honest. Reaching out was like the last possible thing I wanted to do. So we taught, there's a lot of narrative around reaching out, but when you're low, it's actually really hard to do that. I think the reverse is also true, that we all have equal responsibility and accountability to check in. I think the pandemic has made checking in easier, but also harder. We sort of use the fact that we're on Zoom calls all day for work as an excuse that, oh well, I don't want to do another Zoom call tonight.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, okay, well, that's great, but then what are you then going to do about all those friends and family that you're not naturally going to, you know, bump into at the supermarket, or go for a quick coffee, or go and spend the weekend with? You know, what ends up happening is days, weeks, months go past. You suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I haven't spoken to that person for a long time. I'm assuming they're okay, but maybe I should actually be a bit intentional and genuinely ask how someone is. At work now and again, I'll put in coffees with people just to say hello. There's no hidden ulterior motive. It's just, I just wanted to see how you are. And I don't think enough of us take the time to do that. I think we expect if someone's not well mentally that they're going to talk about it in the same way that if I broke my arm, I go to the doctor. But we know that there's still so much stigma around that a significant proportion of people, if they have that challenge with their mental health, I'm not sure they are going to phone the doctor up and get an appointment. So therefore, we have to find ways, A, to encourage them to do that, B, to build this kind of coping strategy, scrapbook of things you can do. But is it also about us being more proactive with each other? I think the pandemic has created a bit more of a community spirit. So in my role, we have a WhatsApp group, and it's just a great way just to sense check. And if you haven't heard from someone for a while, just might pop along and knock on the door or ping them a quick WhatsApp and say, I haven't seen you for a while. I hope everything's all right. Because you never know, you'll have a conversation with someone and then suddenly they'll pour their heart out to you. I've certainly experienced that, where I went to a neighbour's house and checked in, and then I found out all sorts of things about their life that I would never have known had I not asked that question.
Yeah, and they might not have talked to anybody about.
Exactly. And that exacerbates the problem, because then you bottle it up and it gets worse and it gets worse, and and I can say that, speaking from personal experience, that is how it will manifest itself if you don't. It's like a pressure valve. At some point you've got to release the valve, and you either do it slowly and safely, or at some point the valve is going to explode of its own accord.
I think a lot of people are really struggling at the moment, and like I said, feeling really exhausted, and legitimately so. And we've all got this sense of life being put on hold a bit, so we are just trying to get through. It's like this strange transition period we're stuck in, and so we're just trying to wait it out, and like you said, survival mode until we get through to the other side. But all of those feelings that we have, and the reality of just how hard it is, some are sort of getting dismissed a little bit because of this comparison, because we might be telling ourselves that people are having it much worse than I am. But I think all that does is then that adds guilt to the list of feelings as well. Absolutely. And that's not always helpful to do. I know I've done that a little bit. I think I keep saying, well, at least we're healthy, or at least we've got money in the bank, at least we've got this. But we can have it comparatively good to other people and be having a hard time at the same time.
Yeah.
I think, it's possible to be really struggling, but also, be surviving and doing well at the same time. We've got to find that balance of, sure, giving yourself that perspective of where you're at, and some of the good stuff is good. So perspective and gratitude is helpful, but at the same time, we also need to give ourselves permission to sometimes acknowledge and feel that it is all a bit rubbish, because only then, if we acknowledge those feelings, can we actually put the work in to tend to that. Because the risk is, if we don't acknowledge how we're feeling and how difficult it feels, we just won't look after ourselves, and we'll just keep thinking that it's all okay. And actually, I think at the moment, your well-being, I think, is more important than ever to be investing in that. Because we are all struggling in our individual ways, and so more important than ever do we need to be working on that stuff and putting more effort into that. So
great. And where would you say you're personally at in survival mode, or in kind of trying to get past that?
I think a bit of both, and I think sometimes it changes day to day, because sometimes there are those days where it does feel literally like, okay, I just need to focus on the basics today and get through. I just need to make sure that we're all fed and everything that needs to get done sort of gets done. But then I am taking care to, or when I can, really spending extra time on some of those wellbeing practices. And I've certainly learned a lot about myself this year, without some of the distraction of just the other general life busyness and all the social stuff that you'd normally be wrapped up in, and some of my plans being a bit thwarted and stuff. That's given space, I think, for me to do a lot of self-inquiry, which is rewarding and ultimately worth it, but that's also a bit emotionally exhausting. So so some of the good stuff that's been happening, which is ultimately going to be good for my well-being, some of that is also a bit emotionally exhausting. And so I think I just have to check in with myself day to day and listen to my body a bit and say, okay, well, some days I just need to, take it easy, and some days I can push myself a bit more and I can get a bit more done, or I can put a bit more energy into myself and some things that are going to be long-term good for me. But I'm working on, I think, the self-compassion and kindness in particular, and that's what I think I need to get particularly better at in this time. So not being so hard on myself for the days when it is really hard. I need to get better at that.
The final question, just so things, you mentioned there, things are starting to change. There is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. Feels like we're almost here, but it's not going to change overnight. So do you think that we are able to find a way to move past being in just survival mode and getting through it, and really be able to thrive and grow and reach a good level of well-being in this time? And if so, how?
Oh, wow.
Big question to finish.
Big question. Yeah. I think I think people are definitely, like I said, starting to get past survival and having to find new ways of perhaps coping with what might be for quite a lot longer, things like the masks and like I say, the working from home, the different things that we're all partly getting used to, aren't we? It's funny how quickly you can get used to someone looks odd if they haven't got a mask on now, whereas a year ago we would have been like, what? So but I think sometimes even that you have to sort of process, don't you? Because it's weird. You're like, oh, what? How come I'm okay with that now? Like, this is actually really strange. And like I'm sure we've all said, watching things on the television or looking back at old photos of big groups of people, and it all just feels so strange. So I think as things start to come back again, it's definitely another shift, isn't it? And that's what's difficult about it all, is the jumping from this to that, and then we had the other little lockdown, hang on, we're here again. Even from a personal perspective, it's like, all right, no, kids are going out after school, suddenly, oh, I'm back at work, oh, and all your after school things are happening, but in different ways. And you're like, you're just like, don't know where you are. But I think in it all, you just have to remember it's just a funny time. That's how I sort of get through it. I try not to look too far ahead for myself, because I know that gets me a bit like, oh, then I'll get all EBGB. But I think also reflect on the past, but also don't dwell on that either, because it does keep changing, and we are in what we are in now. So I think in order to thrive, I think it's completely possible. I think it requires us to keep ourselves in checks, like I say, learn from where we've been, and try and be as flexible as possible, and just keep asking God for help in it is what I do. So and I think we can thrive, and remember that these are hard times and they are strange times, but I think if we just can keep in check, and I think the after bit for me is definitely, I'm almost more aware of well-being now. I think, like you say, we've come out of perhaps that survival bit, and this is the important bit, like, how has it affected people? Are the kids okay? I try and remind myself to keep checking in with them. I'm so used to them going to school now, but I forget actually it's quite a weird environment for them at school. It's not the same, and although they're getting used to that now, I mean, they're very adaptable, aren't they? So sort of try and take a leaf out of their book sometimes. They just seem to get on with it, and we're all like, oh, hang on a minute. So just I think it's entirely possible to thrive, and just keep God at the center, and try and move with it, because ultimately there's nothing we can really do. So one thing I've learned in life is it's not worth worrying about the future, because we have no control over it. So it's easier said than done, definitely, sometimes, but entirely possible to thrive. I think God is still God, isn't he? And the world is the world, and let's look after each other, and try and check in on those that are lonely and aren't as maybe in such a fortunate position as we are. So
I believe we can, because I think broadly I've found a fairly good level of well-being. So if I can do it, I kind of figure other people can.
Brilliant.
But again, I kind of don't want to be so blinkered to the fact that my situation is a lot more positive. So if you're in a situation that is less positive, and I guess a lot of it comes down to your level of resilience and your mindset on this stuff. I think the reality of how I live my life, and again, appreciate that I'm in a slightly higher castle here, is that we can only work with the cards we're dealt.
Yeah.
In many respects. So, you know, I could take the view that I'm not going to be able to thrive, I'm going to have to wait till the pandemic's over. Well, what happens if that's another 3 years?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could make the intentional choice that I'm going to put my life on hold, but I try and live my life, and I'm not perfect at it, don't get me wrong, I'm not a saint, but I try and live my life recognizing, you know, it's finite, and it is a bit corny to say, but it is genuinely precious. And in my family, we've lost people, unfortunately, as a result of the pandemic, and I think that does bring home that you kind of got to make the best with the hand you're dealt, and that's not always easy, and it will be a struggle, and life can be really complicated and pretty rubbish sometimes. But I firmly believe it is broadly within our gift to try and move past just surviving.
Yeah.
But again, I do caveat that with, if I was in a different position, would I still be saying that? I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to say, because my life broadly, I've never faced like monumental struggles, whereas for many people that is the reality of their life.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a big statement, but I think if we believe that is possible, how do we do that, or how do we even work towards doing that? You know, reaching that good level of well-being.
I think it's all the things that we talked about. It's recognizing the gift of your own life, and making your own decision on how much do you want to leave on the table when you look back, versus how much do you want to put yourself out there and just go for it. It's about recognizing that some days will be bad.
Yeah.
That how you feel will be like a roller coaster, and just kind of accepting that. And then it's about building all of these coping strategies and having a toolbox, so that on the down days you can do little things that help boost you, or on the good days carry on doing those little things, because then they're going to take you higher up the curve. I think it's a combination of those things, as well as just continuing to talk about it and just support the great work that charities like Phase are doing in all of our local communities. It's a combination of all that. But like I said earlier, there's no magic wand, and that's what a lot of people that struggle, they want that magic wand, and unfortunately that's just not the reality in life.
Yeah, I do. I think it maybe just looks a little bit different to how it has looked before. You know, times are different now, and we are going to be going into a different way of life, even when we come to that light at the end of the tunnel. And so we need to live differently. And I don't think we can, you can't compare your life to how it was a year ago and expect the same from yourself, or expect the same things that worked for me this time last year will work for me now, or the level of productivity I had last year I should have now, or my level of well-being last year. Like, I think all of that stuff, we can't use the same measures. It just wouldn't be fair. Like, we've got to I think look at things a little bit differently. And so that I think a certain amount of stripping back to basics is essential, and actually a certain amount of lowering expectations in some ways. I think we need to do in some of the outward stuff, and in some of the kind of, when it comes to this sort of efficiency and productivity and stuff, actually we do need to strip it back to, okay, what are some of the essentials right now, and so lower some of the expectations to relieve the pressure on yourself. Then but I think it's that balance of knowing where to strip back, but then also where to invest. And that's where I think well-being should come in, as something we need to be investing more in at a time like this.
Absolutely.
And I think compassion is the way to do that, being really compassionate with yourself and acknowledging this is going to be really hard. And some days, I might not be able to do, or what you don't want to do is set your level of well-being in some of those practices as something to sort of another standard, and something you have to beat yourself up about. We need to be really compassionate and see that some days things are just going to be really, really hard. But and so that thriving, I guess, might just, it's about how we define thriving, I guess, because I guess thriving involves learning and growing and moving forwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can sometimes be a bit messy and painful, though. So we have, thriving sounds like it's going to be wonderful and lovely all the time, but it might just look a bit messy at times. But actually, it might be moving you forward. So, and I think this pandemic certainly it does provide a lot of opportunities for learning and growing, which will ultimately lead to thriving. So opportunities to learn about yourself, opportunities to work on issues that are coming up for you that have perhaps been triggered by what you've been going through, opportunities to reprioritize your life, so choosing inward over outward, choosing being over doing, and opportunities to grow in resilience and stuff. And all of that stuff ultimately will lead to thriving and living better if we can see those opportunities and invest in those. And I guess you just need to, I think if we can be open to whatever's happening and allow that stuff to teach us, and then as part of that, being open to asking for help in meeting those needs and stuff, and being gentle with ourselves, all of that stuff is going to lead to thriving. So I think it's possible. It will just look different.
That was great. I think there was some really good stuff in there. And, you know, as always, it's important to recognise that balance, that we are in a pandemic, we are in a crisis, and there is a lot of real challenges to that, but also recognising that we want to move past that. We want to aim for a little bit more than that and to really be able to thrive. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that I've really wrestled with, and I think, you know, firstly, like I just want to get out of this. Like, I can't keep living in this debt. And I think actually for me, it's been I've had to really work hard at shifting my mindset of actually being like, okay, I don't know when this is going to end. So actually, instead of just kind of trying to get through this and just almost count down for when it's going to end, which we don't know when it's going to end, actually kind of get into this mode of, okay, how do I almost get used to this as the new norm? How do I adjust to it so that actually I'm not just surviving, but somehow I can perhaps even allow myself to thrive. And I think a big one for this, a big change for us is, you know, we've had to start working from home, which I really, you know, I miss being in the office, but but how do we, you know, it's going to be a long-term thing. And so how do you not just kind of survive working from home, but how do you perhaps even try and make it an environment where you can thrive, where it can be a setting where actually you can work well? And again, it's one of those things where, okay, that is in my, you know, is in my control. I can try and set up a workplace which actually I can start to thrive in that space and work well. So I think that's just one way in which I have tried to go from that kind of okay, survival mode to perhaps thriving a little bit, and also shifting my mindset from I just want to get out of this to actually, okay, well, maybe this is what partly a new norm looks like, and how do I adjust to living in this way.
And like you said, with that circle of control, like if this is something that doesn't change, I can't control, you know, we hope and we're kind of expecting that stuff is going to start going back to normal, but there will be something that don't for a long time. I think working from home probably is one of them. We can't control that, you know. This might be for a year, another 2 years, 5 years, you know, hopefully not, but like that's outside of our control. What we can control is, this is the situation I'm in, how do I make the best of it? I think that's such a good, really important perspective. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being part of this and for sharing your expertise and your wisdom. It's been really great to hear from you. And thank you as well to Kirstie, to Nicholas, to Donna for all that they've shared. And thank you for listening. We really hope that you've enjoyed this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So please do get in contact with us. And as always, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Faze Hitchin. Thank you so much for listening.